Philippine history began in 1521. That's when Ferdinand Magellan discovered our islands.
I was 8 when I wrote that in my notebook. I never asked what came before. Why would I? It was the lesson, but the lesson skipped 1,000 years. Tonight, I want to give them back. Look at this man, bare-chested, covered in tattoos, draped in gold, and standing in the throne room of the Emperor of China. The year is 1001, 500 years before Magellan ever reached these islands. So here's my question. If Filipino history didn't begin until Spain arrived, then who is he? The Chinese knew exactly who he was. They wrote it down. His gifts, his mission, the name of the king who sent him. They called his kingdom Butuan. Chinese records, copper inscriptions, ships buried in Mindanao mud. It was never hidden. So why, in all those years of school, were you never taught a single word of it? Kumusta? I'm Maya. I grew up in Cavite, and I was never taught a word of it either. So before we get to the Spanish ship everybody remembers, I'm going to prove 3 things to you, and prove all 3 before this video is over. 1, before Spain, these islands were not empty. There were kingdoms here, with written law, with gold, with ambassadors sitting in foreign courts. 2, one of these kingdoms was so strong that Spain would spend 300 years trying to conquer it, and never truly could. I'm gonna take you there. Keep it in the back of your mind. And 3, the one that got me. By the time we reach the end, you are going to look at the year 1521 and see something completely different than what you were taught. So let's not waste a second. Let's start with that man from the throne room. Butuan, a kingdom in Mindanao on a river that literally ran with gold. And that envoy from the cold open, he wasn't a fluke. Butuan's kings sent ambassadors to the Emperor of China again and again, 1001, 1003, 1007, 1011. And in 1007, its king made an audacious demand that his envoys be received as the equals of the envoys from Champa. China refused. Butuan, they said, was beneath Champa. So Butuan came back in 1011. Richer tribute, same demand. And this time it won. Equal standing with Champa, granted by the Emperor of China himself. That is not a village chief sending gifts. That is a state conducting foreign policy. The proof doesn't come from us. It comes from China. The annals of the Song Dynasty logged those ambassadors by name, by date, by gift. A rival empire filed the paperwork that proves we existed. And Butuan left gold, the Golden Tara. And it left the balangay, ocean-going ships sewn plank by plank without a single nail. The oldest dated to around the year 300. So Butuan had gold and ships and ambassadors. But here's what gold can't buy. Law, written law. And 900 years ago, on the shores of Manila Bay, somebody carved it into a sheet of copper. This is Tondo, a city on the mouth of the Pasig, the river that carried a whole inland world down to the sea, ruled by lords the people called Lacans. And Tondo left us this, the Laguna Copperplate, pulled out of the mud near Manila and stamped with an exact date, the year 900, 621 years before Magellan. It is not a legend or a prayer. It is a legal document. A receipt clearing a man named Namwaran of a debt of nearly 1 kilo of gold, forgiven by officials with the authority to forgive it. To write that receipt, you need writing and law, courts, weights, record keepers. That is a society with lawyers in the year 900. And here's the thing, Butuan and Tondo weren't even rare. Everywhere the Chinese ships went, they found more of them, and they kept notes. They wrote about Mai, and here's my favorite detail in the whole story. They said the traders of Mai were honest. A foreign captain could hand over his cargo, watch the local merchant disappear inland to sell it, and just wait, trusting he'd be paid. And he always was. Written down in China as the people whose word you could trust. They wrote about Maynila too, the rival of Tondo just across the river. It was being transformed by something new, Islam, carried north from the sultanates of the south through Brunei. Maynila was becoming a Muslim, Brunei-tied port, a walled city the Spanish would have to fight for. And Manila was where Islam had only just arrived. To find where it rooted deepest, you follow it back to its source, far to the south, where it had already built the one kingdom Spain would never break. But first, I have to stop and tell you why this one is personal. I told you we'll get to why I was never taught this. Here it is. I went to Catholic school in Cavite. I loved it. I still hold my faith. So hear me clearly. This is not a video against the church. It never will be. Maybe you learned it the way I did. Maybe you can still picture the timeline on the classroom wall that started at 1521. If part of you always felt something was missing before that date, you were right. But the history they handed me began with Magellan. It began with a baptism. Everything you've just seen. The gold, the ambassadors, the law carved in copper. None of it was on the page. Not a sentence. Not a footnote. I'm not angry at the faith my Lola prayed. I'm angry that someone decided the before wasn't worth teaching. That a girl in Cavite could grow up believing her whole story. Started the day a stranger arrived to discover her. It didn't. So let me keep going and show you the two they really didn't want you to remember. But first, the kingdom that makes the whole discovery a joke. Sugbo, the port we now call Cebu, the beating heart of the Central Islands, a Raja's harbor where the goods of 100 islands were gathered and traded on to China. Loud, rich, and unmistakably governed. And here is the reversal that should rewrite the whole story in your head. When Magellan finally arrived in 1521, this is the harbor he sailed into. He did not discover Cebu. He showed up a stranger at the doorstep of a working kingdom, and its ruler's very first move was to demand tribute from him. The great explorer had to negotiate with the king of Cebu just to do business. The great discovery of the Philippines? A European ship pulling into a port open for business for 500 years. Magellan reached Cebu, but there were two kingdoms further south he would never reach. Here's the part the word discovery can't survive. When Magellan reached Cebu, he didn't find an empty coast waiting to be claimed. He found a port, a court, a Raja named Humabon who did not bow. He asked for tribute. Every foreign ship in his harbor paid, and Magellan's men were told they were no exception. The man we are taught discovered the Philippines arrived as a stranger in someone else's kingdom and was asked to pay the docking fee. You cannot discover a place that is already charging admission. In the great river valleys of Mindanao, the Maguindanaon were raising the Sultanate of Maguindanao. Mosques going up, scholars teaching, sultans seated over the richest rice lands in the islands. a whole civilization taking shape in the south. And beside it, the kingdom that closes the loop I opened when we began. The year 1405, a full century before Magellan, the birth of the Sultanate of Sulu, a Muslim kingdom of the Tausug people. A sultan, a council of ministers, written law, courts, diplomacy reaching Borneo, China, the whole Muslim world, and rich beyond belief on the pearls of the Sulu Sea. Now here is why I made you wait for it. Spain came and claimed these islands for 300 years and fought Sulu for almost every one of them, but it never truly conquered it, never broke it. The Tausug will tell you to this day, chins up, we were never colonized. After 3 centuries of trying and failing, Spain's own generals would have been in no mood to argue. So let's count them. Mai, Tondo, Butuan, Maynila, Cebu, Maguindanao, and Sulu. Kingdom that never fell. Written law, ocean-going ships, international diplomacy, gold worked by master hands. 2 of the world's great faiths, arriving by trade, by choice. Kingdoms that answered to no foreign crown. This was never a people waiting to be discovered. This was a people already standing in the middle of the world. So now 1521, and I told you you'd see it differently. Watch it change. Magellan does not sail up to an empty frontier. He sails into the edge of everything you've just seen. 1,000 years of kingdoms, gold, law, and trade, already old, already humming with life. He lands. He plants across, Spain stays, and the kingdoms don't disappear. The people are still there, the gold is still there. What changes is the telling. History conveniently begins with Spain, and everything before it gets folded into one dismissive word, before. And so, 300 years later, a little girl opens a school book in Cavite, and the first page of her own history is a Spanish sail on the horizon. I'm not telling you this to make you angry at a teacher. She taught what she was handed. I'm telling you because you carry this history, whether anyone gave it to you or not. It's yours. It always was. Here's what I'd come to believe after all of it. Knowing this, Butuan, Tondo, Sulu takes nothing away from who we are now. Not our faith, not our families. It gives something back. You did not begin as somebody's discovery. You began as sailors who crossed open oceans, as goldsmiths and lawmakers and kings. And none of it was ever hidden. It's in China's archives. It's engraved on a sheet of copper. It's in glass cases in our own museums right now. So there's only one question left, the one I opened with. Why were you never taught a single word of it? So let me actually answer that. No one hid this from you. There was no locked door, no banned book. Our history was written by the people who conquered us, and a story that begins with discovery has no room for what came before. So, the before became one short chapter, and the lesson skipped ahead to 1521. It wasn't a conspiracy. It was a borrowed frame nobody thought to question. Until now. That little girl grew up, and when she finally found what came before 1521, she understood the truth had never been lost. It was on copper, in China's records, in glass cases. It was just left out of the lesson.
They were here the whole time. Butuan, Tondo, Mai, Sulu.
So here it is, the chapter they skipped. Now you know it too. I'm Maya. This has been Heritage Pinoy Talks. Salamat sa panonood, and I'll see you in the next one.